And today, during the session, I will be demonstrating the new framework, which is implemented into InfraNodus, and some new import apps that allow you to get all kinds of data and look at them using the InfraNodus functionality. I will show some of the new scientific paper imports, as well as some new apps that allow you to play with the AI and let it help you generate a discourse. I will also show how you can analyze an existing article, a newspaper article or a scientific article, as well as a book, and show how you can also apply this new framework that we introduced to the analysis of the text as well. So it can be useful both if you are reading something, or if you need to make a research of a certain topic, or if you want to also develop your own idea and somehow try to understand a certain subject better, or even write a text based on that. So this is what I'm going to show, and what hopefully by the end of the session you will be also able to do using InfraNodus. I guess we will just wait a few more seconds for the last people to join in. As I said, we have the chat here and the Q&A section. Feel free to add your messages, comments, and questions there. Also, if there is some feature of InfraNodus that you would like to understand better and you don't understand it, feel free to also ask there. I will now also launch a very quick poll, just to understand what people might actually need in InfraNodus. So if you feel like answering, please do that. It's just asking what would be the most important new InfraNodus features for you, what you would like it to do, to load faster or have folders, more AI integration, and so on. And we'll just wait for the last people to join in, and then I will demonstrate the workflows that I wanted to show today. Okay, so far people are answering that the most important features for them is the ability to search through the documents and more AI integration for ideas generation. So searching is something that we are working on at the moment, and what we want to do is the possibility to easily switch from one context to another. So not only the search that we already have and that we can develop, but as well, if I want to see where I was writing on variety, then I could click this, and you can actually do it. If you double click, it should load some of the graphs that it's connected to, and then it will show a list of the other contexts that you had in InfraNodus that would relate to that. So that can be an interesting feature for you to jump in between all the different graphs that you build. And also we also want to introduce folders, so you could organize all the graphs by folders. So I guess also some people answered this. So I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results so you can also see the answers. And then we will get into the webinar and to the practical part. If you have InfraNodus open, you also can follow the instructions if you want, just to kind of train this workflow. It might be useful for you. So you can just open it in another browser window and log in your account. And we will begin. So let's go. First of all, I want to show some of the new import apps. So for instance, here, you have a new option that allows you to explore a new topic. And that can be quite interesting because, let's say, if I just want to start thinking about something, and I need to stimulate my imagination just to kind of heat up my mind, I would use this feature. So I will write diversity, because what we also want to talk about today is about diversity of thinking. And we see what exists on the subject according to GPT-3 AI. So a general overview, that's the first thing that we do with the graph. We don't even have to read what was generated. We just see that a lot of context is about people and being diverse. So somehow the social aspect. We also have something on the words, so something about language that can be interesting, but this is probably the actual origin of the word. And if I click on those words, I can also zoom in and see in which context it's used. So it's about the origin of the word. Then we deselect this and go maybe something about racially and ethnically. So this is something about also discrimination, perhaps. So I understand this. And actually, it might give us an idea to make connections. So I would be asking the AI, and this I can do in this feature. I'm just going to show that I can edit the query. So I will be asking, what's the relation between diversity and discrimination? Because like this, I'm digging deeper on this topic and try to explore the aspect that feels somehow interesting to me. Okay, so this is a simple answer. The discrimination often occurs as a result of diversity. So I can add it into the graph. Then my new statement is highlighted first, and I load more, and I say that it can be defined as differences between people. So the social aspect here, I'm adding this, it's highlighted. And gradually, as you see, I'm start building this discourse based on the suggestions I have. You can even add this long one. And observe how it affects the topic. So at this point, I can also start looking at the analytics panel. And I can see here that I have these different topics, something on the words or the origin, social diversity, also backgrounds of people, and the research. And then there's more topics here. I can make the effort to interpret it myself because it might be useful for my thinking and writing process, or if I want to learn more about the subject. So I'll try to think that topic is perhaps on the diverse backgrounds, but this is in the social sense, so kind of maybe more from social sciences. So I can start thinking in this direction, or I can also ask the AI. So when you see a blue button, it's always a little help to all the analytics features, right? So here, it will generate the names of the topics for me, so I understand what this discourse is about. I see that it's about race, diversity, social groups, and multiculturalism. And then we have more topics here, language also, and so on. So like this, I can start to already explore where I can go further and somehow connect it to what's interesting for me. So I'm interested in diversity for thinking. So I will click on this word and see, okay, I see word, maybe meanings, diversity of words and meanings. So I select these words, they're selected here, generate some facts based on these topics, and then add it into the graph. So here is more about etymology and how also it can have different meanings. So this is something I can further explore and somehow try to reach a point where I would connect it to the discourse I'm interested in this case, thinking process and how we read and write text and so on. So what the system will try to do for you is to allow you to always look at the different parts and the categories that emerge, the elements, and then generate some suggestions for you to understand this topic better and to develop it further. So you can also click on paraphrase graph, and then it's going to make a little summary based on the main nodes in the graph. So it might not be the same narrative, but it will be talking about somehow this topic of diversity and discrimination. So then it adds more into the graph. It's highlighted here, and we develop it further. Then what we have also as this new feature, which was actually already built into all these algorithms that choose what they should try to connect for you, because as you already know, the algorithm is based basically on detecting structural gaps. So two clusters that could be connected but are not connected, and then suggesting some possible connections. So you can develop a discourse further in a way where you find what you could connect in a new way. So for example, here is about sexuality and diversity. It's something that we haven't talked about. If we click on generate question, which I always like because it doesn't provide an answer, but it stimulates us to think in a certain direction. Here it's asking an interesting question of how it affects, let's see what it says. So it connects it to the business context and companies and so on, and how it also feeds into research. So we can add this into the graph, or maybe if this thought is somehow fresh and we want to edit it, then we can also do it here and save it to notes of the graph. So I encourage you to use this feature also. It's something that you don't want to yet add into the graph, but it's just like a note or some interesting statement that you found during your research, but you don't want to add it yet. So you can save it here, and it's always going to be in the project notes there. Then you can generate some more, add this to notes also, and somehow start building this graph, but also saving some interesting thoughts into your own repository of ideas over there. So this is how it would work with this process. And then you have the feature here, which shows what is the semantic variability of the discourse that you're creating. So far, we're not really writing anything. It's more like jotting down some ideas in relation to the notion of diversity. Now we see that we're talking quite a lot about people also in this case. And what this system does here is that it shows us, okay, we are now in a diversified state of this discourse. What that means is that it has high modularity, more than 0.4. It's all explained here if you click. And the main concepts are actually more or less equally distributed between all the different topics. So if you look here, we have diversified network structure, and you can see this also from the graph because we have some nodes that are big, some are smaller. They also form different communities, which are indicated by the position of the nodes, but also by the color. So they're distinct from one another. We have something on words and diversity here in pink color. Then we have people that is connected to also the word diverse and background. So another topic, groups and research and so on. So you see we have this highly defined clusters. And also people is the central node. But then the other central nodes are another group. So this is what this parameter shows, that the influence is dispersed among different topical groups. And that means that we don't have somehow all the main concepts in one group, which would mean that we're talking about the same thing all the time in the text, that it's homogeneous in some way, which can also be interesting if you're writing something different. But here, if you want to make research, I want it to be diverse because I want to explore different topics. So I'm going to go into this direction. And then what it does is that it suggests that somehow there are some positive aspects of this. So for example, here it's written that it is coherent and adaptive discourse because it's open to different points of views, and it also provides different perspectives. But then there are also disadvantages that it might seem less persuasive. So for example, we wouldn't write some kind of promotional text like this. Maybe a newspaper article would need somehow some more focus. So we have two ways that we can move. We either can focus it more, or if we want to really go further, then we can also try to diversify, zoom out. So here it's giving us an advice of what we could do. And here it explains how it would move into the fourth quadrant. And what we have here is actually somehow 4 different states that the discourse can be in, which is also always indicated in this parameter here: biased, focused, diversified, dispersed, and it's also always written here. So this is just a visual image of how that would work. And this first one is biased. At the bottom left, top right is focused, bottom right is what we have now, fractal, diversified, and then it goes into the top left quadrant, which is dispersed. So the system is suggesting us now to slightly disperse this discourse and add some more interesting topics that are not yet central to the discourse. So here it says that we should focus on less represented cluster of ideas and develop it further, or zoom out and introduce a new topic. So think about a completely different idea in relation to the notion of diversity. And we can either use the AI to help us generate this idea. So here it will ask a question that might point us in an interesting direction. How can experts in different fields be better utilized to solve global problems? Okay, so this is something about how maybe diversity can be useful on the global level, also in politics, and maybe diversity of opinions and experts and some kind of think tanks. How can diversity in think tanks be useful for solving global problems? So I can also add my own idea into the graph here. It's going to be tagged ideas so that later I can filter the AI facts, which were added using the AI, and my own ideas, which I'm just starting to add now. And as you see, it also recalculates this parameter. So if I open one idea that I added now, it only says how diversity in think tanks can be useful to solve global problems. I see that it shows me it's too biased, so it suggests me to somehow develop periphery, to think some more ideas that could relate to the subject. So this is how we would explore this discourse further using this feedback. And if we go show all, then we come back to this original diversified state of how we explore this discourse. So this is how it would work with this AI exploration of a topic app. Then you have another version of this, and as I said, feel free to ask something in the chat or in the Q&A section if something is not clear, or if you would like me to go deeper onto one of the topics that I mentioned. But then when we go to the ideation, what happens here is that it proposes us to start not with just a simple concept, but with an idea, and to develop it more step by step. So this is great when you already got a certain understanding of the topic and you want to explore it further. So I would say it's step 2. And here I would write, what's the relation of diversity to discrimination, and how it can be used to promote ecological thinking. So let's really make it very complicated for the system and see what it has to say. Here's generating some facts, and here it's giving us an answer. Diversity can be used, so I can just edit it a little bit. Diversity can be used to promote ecological thinking by helping to highlight the interconnectedness of all life forms and the importance of maintaining balance in ecosystem. This is great, actually. This is exactly what I wanted to hear, and it's providing that, so I'm going to add it into the graph. As you can see, it's also very easy to follow any bias that you might have. So you have to be careful with this tool, not to use it to confirm your opinions only, although when you start writing, it's always a nice thing to do, but to somehow also try to challenge yourself. And it will also do that using all these features here, where it's always trying to suggest you to go into the smaller clusters of topics. So I will try to develop it further. There is this interesting idea about ecosystems and interconnectedness and balance. So I would say, okay, why is balance in ecosystems important? And try to generate some facts in relation to the subject. I can also generate questions, then I'll have to answer the question, and I can easily edit them here, my own answer. So here it's explaining why it's important for ecosystems to be diverse, and how it makes them probably more adaptable, and also help each other develop and grow. So this is interesting because I can say that if we apply this to thinking, then diversity may also help us grow as society, because we accept different points of view and are open to different perspectives, can reach a wider range of consensus and so on. So I can even write some words like consensus, agreement, diversity, just also throwing some words in to make links, because here I'm not yet writing the final text, I'm rather doing a brainstorm on the topic. But unlike in the previous state where we had already somehow pre-generated set of ideas, here we're going more step by step and playing with the AI so that it guides us in the thinking process. And here we can just follow the advice. It will suggest to connect two less represented ideas. So we can also click here, and this is this idea of diversity and ripple effect. And then how it says that if the one element is removed from an ecosystem, then it might affect everyone else. So this interdependence is really important here. And it's an interesting topic to explore. So once again, we will follow this logic. Here, it might give us some suggestions to add stuff about the things that we didn't yet think or talk about. So we can add it here. How can increased interconnectedness of life lead to removal of the highlights that make life interesting? So here, it's not exactly well phrased, but it's an interesting question because it's asking if we are interconnected, does it make our life less interesting because everything is the same? So maybe some kind of idea of diversity in how we connect is also important, and who we connect to also. That maybe we need to know old people and young people, rich people and poor people, so we can know all of the different perspectives. So I can also write this in, and the different kinds of people that we interact with on a daily basis. So basically here you can use this editor to just write some ideas in, and once you have them generated, you can also filter to have only your ideas. Here we have a graph of them, and you can download them as a text file here as plain text, and then import it into any text editor and refine this narrative further. So this is how it would work with this app of generating your idea and developing it further. As I said, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to write in the chat or in the Q&A. And in the meanwhile, we will move on. So you can also do the same for any existing text. So I would like to ask you to send me a link to some text that you would like to analyze in the chat, to a PDF file, or maybe just like a page. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to show another feature, which is on scientific discourse. So for example, let's say I explored the general idea of what diversity is, and now I want to see what are they saying about diversity in science. So I like to use first this app of Google Scholar, because I would go on Google Scholar first, maybe to get a general idea. And I just type in diversity, and it's going to save it into Scholar Diversity Graph. And it will just show me what results exist there on Google Scholar on that topic. And I can also, of course, use different sources. For instance, I could also go and analyze PLOS. We also have Archive now, which is a resource on scientific papers and on papers on mathematics and physics. And then we also have PubMed and I think other sources as well. So what happens with Google Scholar is that it has a slightly slower API, so it takes time to generate, but all the scientific ones are faster because Google doesn't provide direct access to these results. So it's a bit difficult, but we can still get the idea. You see here we have 40 search results from Google Scholar, and we try to understand what they talk about in relation to the topic of diversity in science. And here the node diversity is deleted already. So this is also something that you can do, because if it was there, it would be hard to see what it's connected to because it's in every statement, right? So it overtakes all attention. That's why we select this node and remove it from the graph so we can see the context around this. And we see that it's about average measure. So as a measurement, okay, so someone's talking about this idea. Then we can also click on analytics and on the topics and see what else it's related to. Define, measure. So how to measure diversity. There's a lot of papers on this topic. It's quite interesting because I didn't think about that before, but it's true that it could be interesting to think in this direction. So I can also add it here in the notes, how to measure diversity. This is a note made to this scientific import graph, and then I can also use other ones and maybe get a little bit more precise and try to see what they're writing about diversity in mathematics and physics. I will choose Archive for that, and I will ask to also include the abstracts of papers, so it's a little bit more precise. Add this into the graph, and then we have visualized top research papers on diversity from Archive. Mainly it's papers on physics, network science, also mathematics. So I see that it's about solution optimization. So a lot of stuff about optimizing something. I can even click on optimization and see coevolution and Pareto diversity optimization. So it's some kind of mathematical approach. Also measure, a lot of stuff on measure. And then machine. Let's see, what about machine translation? So something about how this concept can be used in machine translation and so on. So I can get very specific ideas and also see how mathematically it relates to my original research topic. And now we'll go to the Q&A section and try to see. So people write that chat is disabled. Maybe let me see if I can allow everyone to use it, but you can use also Q&A section. So now you also can use the chat, but I will take a paper. Let's say here, there is a paper on multisensory integration, underlying body ownership experiences in schizophrenia and offspring patients. Okay, so we just select all this. And I think it's actually, it's a collection of different papers or maybe chapters from a book or results. Yeah, it's an issue actually in a newspaper, in a scientific journal. So we can also get this into the system. And here we either can create a new graph or also we can use analyze an article. and just copy and paste, or if it was a text, then we would upload it here as a file. Then we click Analyze. It should import. And here it shows us the different topics which are present in this discourse. And here we try to use the same logic. So first I would just look at the main keywords and understand that synchronicity is an important topic in this collection of texts. Then I also see that the topic relationship is important, experience, all this stuff. I can also click on them and see in which context they're used. I can also look at the topics here, show categories, gain a general overview of this discourse, e.g., Jungian psychology, online learning, that's interesting, and brain regions. So this is a very strange connection to online learning, and I might be interested in that because I didn't expect that this would be actually present in this paper and how it connects to the idea. So SPM and educational context. So I can also use all these ideas to then generate some new search, or also try to explore further what this notion of SNP means, and then go a little bit deeper there. I can also look at the recommendation here in semantic variability field. And what I see here is that it suggests me to start bridging the gaps. So here it says, actually it explains what we can do is to remove the most influential nodes or find some gaps in peripheral clusters, zoom in and bridge with the new idea. So I could zoom in on the peripheral graph cluster here and explore this topic of online learning. I could also zoom out here and remove some of the most important nodes so that the structure changes. Let's see what happens. Still focus. So I try to also remove some more stuff and try to make it reach this green area here where it's diverse enough, because that means that you have enough topics that are distinct from one another to explore. So here I see there's a lot about studies and experimental studies with participants. So maybe it's a bit too general for me, but here it's talking about brain activity and regions and synchronicity, and I guess how it relates to this topic of schizophrenia also that we had in the beginning. So there I can start already exploring some papers and ideas in relation to those concepts. And then I can later move on and make it either more dispersed by removing more nodes and exploring what's hiding behind, or also making new connections using this feature here, gap inside, asking it to reveal the gap. Here we have two gaps, and to generate a research question that could link them, which would make me think about this discourse. And here it's size have on the rate of reaction. So size of something on the rate of reaction. The largest molecule, how the large mammals affect their ecosystems. So this can be actually interesting to think also about the physical size and the effect, and maybe how it also translates into thinking. If we talk about diversity of thinking, for example, if a certain thought has a very strong cluster and another one has a very small cluster, does the smaller idea get overtaken by a bigger discourse, how it happens and so on. So this can be an interesting idea to add to my original research. And this is how I would also integrate those ideas coming from some other discourse. I will also look at the suggestions that people write in the Q&A section and in the chat. There were some people that wrote a text. So a text that I think Joan wanted to analyze. I'm going to copy and paste it and try to do that. So I can just go here, new text network graph, analyze the text, copy and paste, save. So we have collective intelligence, machine, animal, human. Then we have this gap here, and we can generate a research question that would link those two concepts and maybe develop this discourse further in an interesting way. What is the relationship between the domain of mind and decision-making in society? How can an integrated study of those two areas advance our understanding of the issue and achieve a consensus? Okay, so decision-making, and this can be also interesting in the context of AI, how we normally make decisions, how we program those decisions to be made. And then eventually, once we make these connections and add some interesting facts, then we can already start to develop some more ideas in relation to the subject. So if I save them to the graph, then they link, and then a new structural gap will come up, which we can then use to generate more ideas. So this is how it would work with the analytics panel and the combination of this with the AI. I will look at more Q&A posts and see what people wrote there, if they wanted to also try something else. So this is a report on how to secure a decisive victory in building a moderately prosperous society in all respects and strive for the great success of socialism with Chinese characteristic for a new era. Great. So how to take over the world within a nice way, I guess, for some people. So let's analyze what this article is saying. So once again, here I would use apps, and then you have this text analysis here, so you can see all the different options you have to analyze text and how you want to see it. Also, maybe you just want to have a word cloud, for example. I like networks more because they're a bit more precise. So here I would maybe even use analyze a book. I could also use analyze an article, upload a file. This is my PDF file. I go into the downloads and choose that file of the report, sorry. Upload it. So we hope that it's going to be recognized by the OCR algorithm. Doesn't always happen. So we have some words, but because as you can see, there are some combinations of words that were glued together, then it didn't recognize all of them. So we need to find this text in a format. It's better if we have it in text format to allow us to analyze it better. So for example, I would then go to this original file name. I think it's here. And I would just search for this in normal text format because this PDF text is not recognized. I don't know if it exists here as a text. So if you find it, then you can send it and we can try to analyze it. But in general, as Bruce is writing, and you are also the one who suggested this text, that you're interested in discourse analysis of political speeches and reports, identifying semantic connections between us and them. So this can be totally done if we get this kind of speeches. I actually was doing it a lot with the presidential speeches, so it's quite interesting because you can really quickly find some really interesting clusters of idea that, for example, in China, they might link the idea of law to governance, and maybe in some other countries it's going to be law and criminal. So we will see how they approach it also in different ways. So yes, it can be very interesting to analyze political speeches. And Joachim in Q&A is saying that the semantic variability score analysis and recommendations make InfraNodus an even more essential tool for my network analysis. Thank you, Joachim. AI is now a most important partner in project creation and strategic planning. It's true that it's very interesting how we can use the AI to actually ask questions and help us develop ideas. So what I like with this functionality is that it's not really trying to do the job for us, but rather it's an assistant. It's a tool that stimulates us, as if we had a partner during writing and have a conversation with this partner who would ask us interesting questions that would allow us to think further. And Albus is asking if he would import text markdown. Is there a method syntaxes to emphasize certain ideas to make AI focus more on those ideas? Yes, Albus, it exists. So basically what you have to do is to go into knowledge graphs and choose PKM. I think you also have it in Ideation as well. And then you use the syntaxes. So for example, you want to write that diversity is important for social balance. And here I even make a combination of the words. And as you see, only those two words, so important is not added, are added into the graph and analyzed. And also, of course, AI will then respond to only what you see in the graph. And if I want to continue, I can use this Wikilink syntax to write more. So I can say also diversity leads to less discrimination. And I can even add more text. So for example, make a triangle of connections and more, let's say, social balance. Okay, add this, and then we have a triangle, and so on. So this is how you could write. And if you're using some personal knowledge management system like Rome Research or Obsidian or Logsec, actually that's the syntaxes you use there to highlight ideas and how they connect. So you could also use them and then import all their data into InfraNodus. And Maris is saying the network graph is not rendering properly in Surface Pro 7. Is there any settings to be changed? So if it's a special device, I think Surface is Microsoft, you need to probably write us a support request, and then we will try to emulate Surface Pro and see what might be wrong there, or if it's your settings. But usually the graph should be showing. So it might also be that some people make some changes in settings. So for example, here you might sometimes change to process only hashtags. And for example, your text don't have any hashtags. So then if you import the text, then your graph doesn't show. So sometimes it makes sense to just set all the settings back to default. It's usually the first option. So if you want it to be default, just make it to the first option everywhere. If you changed anything, save settings, and then the graph will show. So this is like a quick hack to solve this kind of problems. And the text boxes. Okay, so we should check that. I will make a request from it, and if you want to provide more details, feel free to do so also. So this was a demonstration of these different ways how we can approach analyzing an existing text or writing a new one. Feel free to try it out also in InfraNodus. If you have any more questions, please let me know. In the meanwhile, I'm just going to show a couple of things that might be interesting for marketing people as well, or for those who study markets and different discourses for product development as well. So here we have search engine optimization, which is a specialized thing. But for example, an interesting feature that we just added that I find quite useful is this keyword research one, where basically you're searching for what people search for in relation to search queries. So what we used before was the AI generating some facts. Here, we will see in which context people usually search for the word diversity on the internet. So what else are the words that they use? And for example, here we see that we already have the word diversity removed. So the words that it's used with are inclusion, workplace, cultural. Okay, so we can even click and see cultural diversity and inclusion examples in the workspace. So workspace inclusion and cultural inclusion. And what's interesting here is that we can actually see how this context is different to some other context. So for example, we have this, which is what people search for when they search for diversity. Then I click this button, which allows me to compare graphs. I say that I want to see how it's different to, let's say, Google results on diversity. And then I click this. I clicked by X this, so Google diversity, and then visualized. And now I have a graph showing me what people see in Google search results, but do not search for, which is interesting because there is some stuff on innovative labs and data access, but people don't seem to search for it so much. And if we reverse, then we will see what they search for, which doesn't exist on Google. And here we have a cultural diversity. So for example, when we search diversity, maybe the word cultural will not come up so much. And so that means that it's something that people look for, but don't find. And it provides us a general understanding also of what diversity is. So we can go into this graph here. This is the search result, the actual keywords and search phrases that people use when they search for the notion of diversity. Okay, and then another thing in the marketing is that you can also analyze surveys and customer reviews. So this is quite interesting because if you have a open question survey results, and maybe you gathered feedback on a certain feature in a product, or maybe you're asking people who live in a certain region how they feel about this region, because you want to understand their problems and find some interesting solutions, and you can use this app. And here you can just paste all the responses, or you can also import a CSV file, a spreadsheet, where you would have a column that you analyze, and then the different categories that you want to have. And then you could get the graph in which you could filter all these different categories using the filter at the top, like we usually have here. So here we have archived papers, and we could filter and see only those papers and so on. So this is something that can be interesting for those who are researching survey responses and customer reviews. If you don't have any questions, I think we'll stop here. If you want to try this feature out, once again, it's available all in this apps page, where you can make ideation, explore a topic, or write a text. Here, writing is kind of the same, that you can start from something that you are ready with. So for example, diversity in thinking, I can also just add this through the text editor. And then the AI will be generating some ideas for me, which I can use or not to continue writing and to develop my discourse further. And here I will have a recommendation, in this case, only 2 ideas. So it's proposing me to generate some more stuff. And I might be saying, how does diversity of thinking affect society? So add some ideas in and continue writing in this way. So this is just a mode to go through exploring and writing an idea. And the new marketing features that you can use to analyze the market or responses of a big group of people. This is how it works. Thank you very much for joining today. We will stop the webinar now. Feel free to contact us. I will leave the support portal in the chat. So here we have some support articles on the subject. Later, I will also send you a couple of more articles on the way that this feature works. So here is one which is more of a tutorial, and another one which is explaining the concept behind. And it has some images also, this article, so you can feel free to explore. I think you can see it now, how it works. I left the link in the chat, so you can also read this article. And here it explains a little bit all the technical aspects of how we have these different states of diversity in the graph and in our thinking, how it can be represented visually as a network, and how the method that we propose oscillates between focus and exploration. So at some points you focus and you connect ideas. At some other moments you explore and you disconnect them and you let your attention disperse. And then we also have zooming in and zooming out. So we look at the bigger picture, and sometimes we zoom in onto a specific topic. And basically, because these 2 axes are here, explore, focus, zoom out, zoom in, then we're just oscillating between these different combinations of states. So here we zoom in and explore, then we start focusing and zooming out. Then in the stage 3 to 4 at the top right, we focus a little bit more, but we zoom in again. And then we zoom in more and start to disconnect things and to make new connections. So it's also shown with graphs here. And then going back into the last state of dispersing ideas, finding new singularities and focusing on them again. So it's really a combination of exploring, focusing, zooming out and zooming in, and going through these 4 different states, which somehow are identified by the transitionary stages of the semantic network that we are constructing. And the algorithm in InfraNodus is basically made to guide you through this process to modulate this kind of thinking. Of course, you can also go from this quadrant back and to the top right if you want to have a focused idea. If you want to disperse your attention and get some new inspiration, then it's this stage here. So basically, this article explains a little bit through text and visually how that would work and how it's also used in InfraNodus. I left the link in the chat, so feel free to check this article. Thank you everyone for joining again. The recording of the webinar will be available. I will send the link after we're done. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to contact us via the support portal or email, which I'm also leaving in the chat now. And I hope you enjoy this feature. If you have any suggestions or feedback, please let us know, because we're working on all of these things and trying to make them easier to use. So we're very open to your suggestions, and also if you can share if it was useful for you, so we know what actually works the best for the people. Thank you very much for your attention and your time, and I hope to see you again soon at the next webinar, and I will be sending the recording of this one to you later. Thank you and goodbye.